so we're starting over this morning. We just had an audio glitch. I think we've got a server that's on its last leg, and we'll try to get through this. So if you missed the opening, I told a story about a young man named Kevin Stefan who was a bat boy. He was a volunteer firefighter, and he was a waiter, and he lived in this town of Depew, New York. And one night at a baseball game, when he was doing his bat boy duties, he turned around while someone in the batter's box took a hard practice swing and caught Kevin right in the heart, sending him into immediate cardiac arrest, and he went unconscious. A lady named Penny Brown, sitting in the front row, jumped over the fence and started performing chest compressions and CPR on him and saved his life. 7 years later, Penny Brown was dining at the Hillview restaurant in Depew, New York, when she began to choke on food and couldn't catch her air, and she was choking to death. And she stood up and she was leaning over a chair, and right before she went unconscious, a young man from the back came up, gave her the Heimlich maneuver, and saved her life. When she turned around, it was the same Kevin who she had saved 7 years earlier. And this story leads into today's verse, and it teaches us that we are to be prepared to love our neighbor, to help others, not expecting anything in return, but knowing that's God's will for us. And you never know, what goes around comes around. This verse of the week, Matthew 22, 37 through 39 says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourselves." Now, Jesus spoke these words in response to a question when the Pharisees had brought a legal expert, their big lawyer, to challenge him, to try to trick him and trap him into saying something contrary to the law. And they asked him, what is the most important commandment? Now, when we think of commandments, we know we have the 10 commandments, right? And here's what's interesting about the 10 commandments. They're actually split in two parts as well. The first 5 commandments talk directly on how we are to honor and love God, that there's only one true God. The first 5 commandments deal with God. The second 5 commandments deal with how we are to treat others. The do not lie, do not murder, do not covet. They're about people. And it's amazing how Jesus summed up 10 commandments by saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. And the second's like it, love your neighbors yourself. He basically not only summarized all the commandments and split them exactly like they're written, he also covered all the 600 plus Jewish laws, regulations, rules. And by doing so, they were amazed. Now, why is this verse famous? Because the words summarize the heart of Jesus' whole ministry. They're often called the Great Commandment. They're the Great Commandments because they capture the core of how Christians are called to live. So the Bible is a giant book. Actually, it's 66 books all wrapped up into one. And in this book, you will find countless laws through the years. There was kings and the temple leaders. People were constantly taking something and making a law. They had to make a rule out of everything. And there's all kinds of rules. There's all kinds of wisdoms from the Proverbs and the Psalms. And there's all kinds of practical advice. And it can be overwhelming. And it can be really hard, even for lifelong Christians, to make sense, well, how am I really supposed to live? There's so many rules and regulations and things to do, but how am I really supposed to do things? And we get caught up in what's called paralysis by analysis. We try to process so much information. You may do this at work. You have so many things going on, and you're trying to calculate and process. You end up not doing nothing because you just come paralyzed because you're overwhelmed with data and information. Sometimes we just have too much to do, We don't even know where to start. You may have seen a video or a news clip recently in Russia where they were at a circus and they had the tiger cage and they had the tiger trainer in there, and the cage fell down, and one of the tigers just decides he's going to go out into the audience. And the people were scared. They didn't know what to do. And I think the tiger was more nervous and scared than the people. He was looking for a way to get out of there. And people were paralyzed. They didn't know what to do. They were shocked. And the tiger trainer, and if you've seen them, they got their fancy circus jacket and outfit on, and they carry a pistol and they carry a whip. And the third thing they carry is a wooden stool. And the trainer went to get the tiger and brought him back into the cage. They asked the trainer, you carry a pistol and a whip and this stool. What's the most important tool? And you might say, well, in a situation like that, it might be that pistol or that whip. He said, actually, the most important thing we carry is that wooden stool with 4 legs. And he says, but if you notice, the key is when they hold the stool towards the tiger, they point the legs at the tiger and they hold the seat of the stool like a steering wheel. And you'll see the tiger kind of stand up and paw at it and do its thing. And the reason they do that is a tiger has laser focus. When he zeroes in on a target, he's totally blinded by anything else, and he can focus on one thing at a time. And what the stool does, the 4 legs, they confuse the tiger. And it actually creates a numbing paralysis situation because the tiger doesn't know which leg to focus on. And you'll see these tiger trainers turning this stool, and the tiger becomes less and less aggressive because he can't focus. He can't take action. And as Christians, we fall into that same trap. We think and worry about so many rules and what's right and what should I do. We end up doing nothing. But Jesus makes it real simple. God wants us to love God and to love others. But what's that mean? To love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Your heart is who you are. It's your inner being. Your soul, your spirit is your connection to God. And your mind is your living conscience and the way you process things. That means letting Him, God, shape every part of your life. Excuse me. Not just your beliefs, but also your personal desires. The choices you make every day, the attitude you have towards others, and the thoughts that run through your mind daily. It's choosing to trust God's way, even when His way does not match necessarily what we want or what the world tells us we need. The world says, do you, be yourself, be proud, puff that chest up, stand up for who you are. And yet God says, be who I made you to be. Do what I ask you to do. And just love me. To love your neighbor, the second part of the verse, as yourself means we treat others with the same care and dignity that you would want for yourself. And who's your neighbor? Jesus shows us one of His most famous stories, the parable of the Good Samaritan, that everyone on earth is our neighbor. You see, after they challenge Jesus and He responds with today's verse, to love your neighbors yourself, the lawyer, in kind of a counter question, he says, well, who is my neighbor? Now, what if the person you avoid? When I say person, it may be an individual, a specific person you have in mind, but it may be a class or a group of people, a race, a nationality, someone with different religious beliefs than you. What if the person you avoid is the one Jesus calls you to love? The parable of the Good Samaritan is more than a story about kindness. It's a challenge to love across every dividing line. Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37 contain the story of the Good Samaritan. A parable is a simple story that uses everyday imagery to reveal deep spiritual truths. Now, Jesus didn't invent a parable. They'd been used for quite some time, but Jesus was the master storyteller of parables. And he used them to teach us about how God's kingdom worked. So here's how the story of the Good Samaritan goes. Man's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho when he's attacked. He's robbed. He's beaten. And he's left half dead on the side of the road. A priest walks by and sees him and crosses to the other side to avoid him. Have you ever crossed the street or stepped away on a sidewalk or walked somewhere else to avoid somebody that you see in your path? Someone that didn't look like you? Someone that wasn't acting like you? Someone that you considered maybe less than you, and you walked around them. That's what this priest did. He walked to a different side of the road to avoid this beaten man. And a Levite, another religious leader, he comes down and does the same thing. But then comes a Samaritan. And Samaritans were hated by the Jewish people. They were considered, even called dogs. They had some different beliefs, and they were considered outcasts. And the Jewish people, the people that Jesus was telling this story to, would have seen this person as an outsider or even an enemy. But the Samaritan doesn't walk past. He stops to help. He treats the man's wounds with oil and wine, and he bandages him up, and he puts him on his own donkey. And he takes him to town, and he pays out of his own pocket money for this man to stay in the inn and to get medical treatment to recover. And he says, here's more than enough that should cover it. I've got to go do my business, but I'm going to come back by and check on him. And if I owe any more money, I promise to pay the remainder then. So a quick recap. A traveler is attacked and left for dead. Two respected religious people passed by without offering him aid. Only a Samaritan stops to help. He gave his time, he gave his money, and his compassion to care for a complete stranger. Who are these people in this story? Well, the traveler is anyone who's in need or hurt or vulnerable or unable to help themselves. That's who the traveler represents. Who are the robbers? They're anyone who preys on the vulnerable, who harm, who exploit, or devalue others, that they are less than themselves. Who's the priest and the Levite? They're the elite, the religious elite. They have titles. They look the part, but they fail to live out God's law. They're what some people today would call fake Christians or false prophets. They look good, they can quote the Bible, they can do all the right things, but at their very heart, they ignore the most basic things that God asks them to do. And who's this Samaritan? He's a disliked cultural and spiritual outsider, but he shows real mercy and love, even when it's costly. The parable of the Good Samaritan is Jesus told the story to show that loving your neighbor isn't just about helping people in need, it's about helping people regardless of their beliefs, their backgrounds, their opinions, or whether they even fit our own expectations. Have you ever avoided somebody because they didn't believe what you believe? They had a different background, they had a different opinion, or they just didn't fit our expectations of what you should look like or how you should dress. We just avoid them. The big takeaway is loving God means loving all people, even when it's inconvenient, complicated, or uncomfortable. When the question was asked, who is my neighbor? This legal experts, in other words, he was asking, who do I have to love? And based on the context of the stories, it seems like he was silently asking another question. The kind of question that we've all asked in our own minds. We just don't say it out loud. Who is it okay for me to hate, to dislike, or to just ignore? The story starts with a question, who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered through the parable, the person you've been avoiding, the person you look down upon, the person you don't like or trust. So what's all that story of the Good Samaritan? What's that parable really mean? This is what makes the story so challenging and so needed. Jesus chose a story, and he chose someone the crowd believed was on the wrong side of religion. They were on the wrong side of culture, and they were on the wrong side of history to be a hero. Someone they had been taught to fear or dismiss, and Jesus said, that's the one who got it right. The person you think is too different from what you believe to be worthy is the one that did the right thing. Now here's what's interesting. The Samaritan is described based on his race. The priest is described based on his title. He has status. He's a priest. The Levite is described based on his religious status and belief. But the wounded man in the story, that man that got attacked, is never named or described by a race, a religion, or a status. And maybe that's the point. Mercy doesn't begin with labels. It begins when we see someone hurting and we choose to move towards them. So many times we live in such a divided country. And there's conflict in the world, and we're divided even amongst ourselves. And we put labels on everybody, and we separate the crowds by labels. And we pick and choose based on those labels who we associate with, who we believe, and who we trust. But there are three truths from the parable of the Good Samaritan. Number one, real love isn't proven by what you believe. It's proven by mercy. Your beliefs are up here, but mercy requires action. Number two, your neighbor includes the person you've been taught to avoid. Your neighbor is the person you've been taught is not good enough, is not like you, doesn't have your political belief, doesn't vote like you, doesn't look like you, doesn't protest like you. Your neighbor includes that very person. And number three, following Jesus means moving towards need, not away from it. To be a follower of Jesus means to rush and to help all who are in need, not to work away from it. So as we wrap up and conclude today, what's the next steps? What's the takeaway? I want you to reflect. Who's someone you've been tempted to avoid that Jesus might be inviting you to love? It may be someone specific that you've avoided because you've had a falling out, a disagreement. It might be a family member. It might be someone in your church or just someone at work. Who are you tempted to avoid? And Jesus is inviting you to love. It might be someone socially. It may be a group of people that think, believe, have different thoughts than you do, political views, affiliations. Who is Jesus calling you today? He's inviting you to step back, to love that person. Because he created them just like he created you, and he loves them just as much as he loves you. The action step out of this story, look for one opportunity this week, even if it interrupts your schedule, to care for someone who's hurting. It might be as simple as checking in with a friend. It might be offering help to a stranger, someone you don't even know, or it might be given to someone in need. But whatever it is, be that neighbor. Be that neighbor that whenever your faith feels complicated, you start right here. You focus on loving God and loving people. And you go through the week remembering the words of Jesus in Matthew 22, 37 through 39, where Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Have a blessed week, and we hope you join us back here next week.